All right. Ooh, boy, that's a little dark. How about we make it a little brighter so you can see something behind me? Hey folks, how's it going? Chuck Holton here, and today is Saturday. It's about 7 p.m. over here, which would make it about noon on the east coast of America, if I calculate that right. Thank you for joining us. And I want to give you an update on what's going on over here in Israel in the war. But you know, I just happened to see Deborah Corneliuson asking about the war in Ukraine. And you know, you're right, Deborah. We shouldn't forget about the other disasters and mayhem that's going on around the world. There's a whole lot that's going on besides what's happening right here in Israel. And maybe we ought to talk about that. If you guys want me to go into the kind of a quick update of what's going on in other parts of the world, I can do that. And of course, I could talk for a long time about what's happening in Ukraine because I spent 6 months there last year, and I've spent about a month there already this year too. You know, Ukraine is a much different war than what we see here in Israel. Sorry, I've got a tickle in my throat. Ukraine is a very conventional war. The most conventional of wars that I've ever seen in my career, which goes back to about 2002. So most of the wars that we've been engaged in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, places like that, have all been insurgencies. And an insurgency means that anybody around you could be the enemy. You don't know who the enemy is because they hide among the population. They wear civilian clothes, and the only way you know that he's the enemy is when he's shooting at you. That's far different from what's happening in Ukraine, where you have two uniformed armies engaged in land warfare on the ground. If you had told me that there would be a land war in Europe, you know, in my career, I wouldn't have believed you until this war started. I really did not believe that Russia was going to invade Ukraine up until the moment that they did. And I wasn't alone in that sentiment. Most of the people in Ukraine didn't believe it either. That's because they had gotten sort of accustomed to the threats from Russia. They had been threatened by Russia and indeed under attack by Russia since even long before, 8 years earlier in 2014, Russia, after the Maidan Square incident and the revolution that they had there, kicking out their pro-Russian president and replacing him with a more pro-Western president. Yay, Daniel, you caught my live. That incident in 2014 wasn't even the beginning of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. That goes back even further. But if we just start in 2014, that's when Russia annexed the two areas in Donetsk and Luhansk province in the Crimea, the Donbass and the Crimea. So you probably understand, if you watch the news, you understand a little bit about this, but for those who don't, the Donbass region is the far eastern region of Ukraine. Ukraine is a very large country. And how large? Well, roughly the size of Texas, maybe a little bigger. It takes a good, from Kyiv, which is sort of centrally located in the northern part of Ukraine, it takes about 5.5, 6 hours to drive to the Black Sea in the south, and about 7 hours or more to drive out to the eastern border of the Donbass. Part of that is because they don't have very good roads, and so you can't drive super fast. But suffice it to say, it's a big country, very flat, kind of featureless, at least in the eastern part. Just trees and fields of wheat as far as you can see, sunflower fields, things like that. The Donbass region is an area that Russia has wanted actually for some time, because about 2013, I believe, they started finding oil and gas in that region. And they found about 39 trillion cubic meters of gas in the Donbass, which would have allowed Ukraine to pretty robustly compete with Russia for the ability to provide natural gas to Western Europe. Big market. You know, Russia, over 40% of its governmental revenue came from oil and gas sold to Europe, so they really needed that, and they didn't want the competition. So that's one reason why they really wanted to take the Donbass. And the areas that they took at the beginning of the war, other than the parts that they were trying to go for Kyiv and everything like that, pretty much coincided with the areas that had those oil and gas reserve. So they have been able to, I guess in one sense, Russia has been successful in being able to keep Ukraine from competing with them, but at the same time, they made it worse because now there's no reason to compete, because Europe is not getting its oil and gas from Russia just in any meaningful sense. So they sort of shot themselves in the foot with that one. And in a way, if you want to understand the war in Ukraine, it's kind of like a jilted ex-boyfriend who stalks his ex-girlfriend and comes to her and says, you know, if I can't have you, nobody can. That's really what it came down to. They wanted to, the Ukrainians wanted to kind of move more toward the West. They wanted to be more European. And Russia just didn't want that. Well, Vladimir Putin didn't want that. I don't know that the rest of Russia really cared. But Vladimir Putin certainly wasn't going for that, because he wants to reconstitute the Soviet Union, the Soviet reunion, if you will. How is that war going? Well, we haven't forgotten about it. It's just that when the news becomes ordinary, it kind of stops being news. And so the new ordinary in Ukraine is that there is fighting out on the Eastern Front. You know, the lines have sort of solidified a little bit. There's been a tremendous loss of life. Russia continues to sort of randomly bomb with missiles and rockets civilian areas, non-military areas all around the country. But Ukraine's air defense capabilities have gotten much better since the beginning of the war. And so most of those rockets and missiles that are fired at least toward major built-up areas like Kyiv and Lviv get shot down. People in Kyiv, when the air raid siren goes off, rarely even flinch. They just pretty much, thank you, Frederick, they just pretty much go about their business, or maybe whip out their cell phone and film the missiles getting intercepted over their heads. It's interesting here because here it's much more a part of the culture to immediately run to the shelter if you hear the sirens. And I think that's because here in Jerusalem, or here in Israel, they have much better air defense capability that can very specifically pinpoint where the missiles are going to fall. So when rockets come out of Gaza, as they have been, I mean, you see me looking at my phone, that's because I'm getting rocket alerts here. If you see the red there, those are rocket alerts. So when my phone buzzes, I'm always keeping an eye on it, not because I think it's going to hit me. I just am interested to see where the rockets are going. I would know if it was coming this direction because the siren here would go off. In Ukraine, the sirens go off whenever a plane takes off from Russia heading toward Ukraine. So they have no idea where the missile might go. So they just tell the entire country to take shelter, and it kind of has the opposite effect. It's really inured people to the sirens, and so they just don't pay any attention to them anymore, which is not a great thing. But it is what it is. That's Ukraine. As far as what's happening in the Ukrainian war, the Ukrainian army has been making steady but slow progress against the Russians, pushing the Russians back out of their country. Russia, for its part, has had very severe losses of equipment and men, although they don't really care about the losses of men because they've got millions of men to throw into that conflict. And, you know, I've been reading a book about the Russian-German fighting that went on in World War II between Russia and Germany. The Germans took over most of Ukraine, pushed all the way into Belgorod, and then were pushed out by the Russians. And it's interesting to hear the accounts of how Russia didn't even bother treating their wounded or recovering their dead. They just kept throwing more and more bodies at the German positions. And they literally just overwhelmed the Germans, not with superior firepower, not with superior tactical prowess or strategy or anything like that. Their only strategy was just to drown the Germans in a sea of Russian corpses until the Germans couldn't support that anymore, and they had to back off, had to leave. And it seems like that's kind of still their strategy. They have thrown a ungodly number of troops into Ukraine at the Ukrainian lines. And I've been out there on the front lines and have seen the Russian bodies just putrefying all over the battlefield. And the Ukrainians will tell me, we're actually tired of killing Russians. I mean, they just keep sending wave after wave after wave, and we machine gun them all down. We just kill them all. And then they just send another wave of convicts after, and they just keep coming. So it seems like their strategy is to drown Ukraine in a sea of Russian bodies again. But the thing that they can't sustain, the Russians, is the losses of equipment. And so Russia has lost more than half of all of its tanks in Ukraine now. When I was there last year, we were saying they had lost more than half of their active, usable tanks. Now they've lost more than half of all of the tanks they had, even the ones they had in storage, in my understanding, at least the ones that were functional. They're resorting now to very, very old tanks that should be in museums. And part of the reason for that is because they're easier to work on and to fix. They're not as complex. Russia has been able to build quite a few new tanks since the war started, a couple hundred, but they're losing thousands. They're losing like 4 tanks a day for going on 2 years pretty soon. And they can't sustain those losses. So what we've seen is that Russia has started going to countries to which they had sold weapons, to which they had sold tanks and sold trucks and armored vehicles and stuff, and asking for those things back and saying, hey, can we get those back from you? Armenia, for example, had bought $400 million worth of Russian armored and equipment, and Russia never even delivered it. They just said, sorry, we can't part with it now. And they took it back, and or they just kept it and sent it into Ukraine. They are also pulling their peacekeepers out of places like Armenia. They've shut down, I think, about a third of all of their peacekeeping detachments, you know, the little bases they had around in the Nagorno-Karabakh district. And they are pulling those troops back and sending them to Ukraine. So things are not going well for Russia in that war. And they're not going well for Ukraine either. I mean, nobody wins in a war. War is just profanely wasteful. It's horrifically wasteful. And it's a waste of lives, it's a waste of money, it's a waste of effort. And for what? All for one man's pride. Now, if you want, I can go and do a much fuller explanation of what's happened in Ukraine and what is happening in Ukraine. And I will do that over on my channel. So you can go to the Hot Zone with Chuck Holton, and I can do a full podcast on the Ukrainian conflict and answer more of your questions. It's really hard for me to answer the questions or make comments on everything that happens here because there are just so many things going by. Cold War vet, thank you for your service. Oh, it is Veterans Day, isn't it? I didn't notice, but thank you very much. It's very kind of you. And I appreciate your kind words. You know, I spent 8 years in the U.S. military, 4 years with the 75th Ranger Regiment as an infantryman in the Rangers, and 4 years flying helicopters because I got tired of sleeping in mud puddles. And I miss the military in some ways, but in some ways, I don't miss it one bit. They wanted me to re-enlist, but they didn't have enough money in the U.S. Treasury to keep me in the Army because I was done after 8 years. I was ready to go do something else. But the good thing about my job now is that every once in a while I do get to go out and embed with U.S. troops or troops around the world and very quickly remember all the reasons why I got out. So about the time I start feeling bad and missing it, I just have to go cover the war a little bit, and then I remember, oh yeah, it's very, very miserable being in a war zone. Thank you very much. Buy myself an ice cream. Well, I appreciate it. All the donations that come into CBN here, they go to help keep us in the field, keep us out here bringing you information. I'll just very quickly tell you, I was actually supposed to be on my way home today, but I was flying out of Amman, Jordan, rather than out of Tel Aviv because it's half the price, and we try to save you money wherever we can here at CBN because this is all donation funded, but also well, I think it'd be less hassle, honestly. Going out of Tel Aviv is a real hassle security-wise, and you have to fly El Al right now. I try to fly United wherever I can, and I'm this close on miles to keep my status for this year. So I decided to fly out of Amman, and when I drove to the border yesterday, I got there and they had closed 3 hours early for Shabbat, just because, and didn't tell anybody. And I was literally 5 minutes too late, and so I couldn't get across the border. Which means I couldn't get across the border today either because it's Shabbat, everything's closed. So I have to wait until Monday because the flight leaves at 1:45 in the morning. So I can't leave Sunday because they don't open the border until 8 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. So I would have missed the flight Sunday too. So I have to leave Monday now, which makes me very sad because I was really looking forward to seeing my lovely wife, and I haven't been home in a month and a half. And I was only going to get 4 days at home to visit my family and play with the monkeys and the dogs. I've got 2 pet monkeys. That's a whole nother story. But now I only get 2 days at home, and then I'm off again, and I'm coming right back here after a quick speech in Texas on the 17th. The good news about that is I'll be able to come back here and continue bringing you the news about what's happening in this conflict and other conflicts as time goes on. And hopefully this thing will be over sooner rather than later, and then I'll be able to just go back home and enjoy my family again. Now, Where were we? Okay, let's talk about the war over here in Israel and what's going on over the last 24 hours. The IDF is making good progress, but they are taking it slow and methodical and intentional on everything they're doing in the Gaza Strip. And that includes, one of the reasons they're doing that is because they are trying to minimize civilian casualties. They have surrounded the Shifa hospital in northern Gaza. There were tens of thousands of people taking shelter in and around that hospital, including a lot of Hamas fighters. There's video that has come out of inside the hospital where they're treating the wounded, a bunch of Hamas fighters walking by with their weapons and everything. So it obviously was not a neutral spot by any stretch. And that's the hospital that they say that the IDF headquarters is underneath. So they've surrounded the hospital. The people that were, the civilians that were taking shelter there have left in like 50,000 of them, like a lot. Israel had very, very precise and accurate intelligence about one Hamas commander in particular who was forcing people, more than 1,000 people, to stay in northern Gaza when they wanted to leave, but he was forcing them to stay as human shields. And the IDF made a pinpoint strike and killed that guy and rescued all those people, and they were then able to leave. They have killed something like 150 Hamas fighters over the last 24 hours, if not more. They have been calling in literally hundreds and hundreds of airstrikes. I mean, every day they've performed, I think, in Gaza itself, more than 3,000 fire missions since the beginning of the conflict. What a fire mission is when you have troops in combat, engaged in combat with the enemy, they can get on the radio and call for an artillery strike or an airstrike or a drone strike or whatever on the enemy positions so that they don't have to maneuver against those positions to take them out. And so instead of charging that bunker or that pillbox like you would have had to do in World War II, they call for fire, and they give the coordinates, and they call those rounds in on top of the enemy and kill the enemy so they can move up and clear that position with much less risk. They have done more than 3,000 of those fire missions since the beginning of the war, and more than 15,000 airstrikes. If you can even wrap your head around that, the number of airstrikes is just mind-boggling. 15,000 airstrikes in a month's time, a little over a month, is just wow, holy cow. So actually today would be a month and a week. The specialized units of the IDF that are their engineer units called sappers that go in, and their job is to go in and clear the tunnels. They have blown up more than 300 tunnels inside Gaza. They have cleared a whole bunch more. They have found tunnels in little kids' bedrooms, tunnel entrances. They've found tunnels outside of the hospital, next to mosques, schools, playgrounds, everywhere. There are tunnels all over Gaza. It's going to be a long time before they're able to actually clear all of those tunnels. Now, the most frustrating thing for me is that the IDF has chosen to disseminate footage through their network of combat correspondents. These are IDF soldiers whose job it is to go in and record what's going on. But they won't let journalists in to Gaza to go film it ourselves. So other than, I don't know, a week or so ago, they let Fox News and CNN and BBC go in just for an hour just to say that they crossed the border. They didn't let them really get into the combat or anything. But they then decided that they were not going to allow journalists into Gaza at all for the foreseeable future, but instead they're going to disseminate footage every day from the IDF, which gives you a more close-up view of what's happening. It's safer for me, which that's all right with me. One of the things I've learned about this job is that The longer you stay in the war zone, the more likely you are to get hurt. As we used to say, you know, that you hang around the barbershop long enough, sooner or later you're getting a haircut. Speaking of which, I got a haircut today in the Old City. How's that look? Nice, nice clean haircut by a Muslim Palestinian barber, and named Omar. And he was a good guy. He was a nice guy. Did I feel like I was in danger? Not really. I felt pretty comfortable. Talked to the guy a little bit, and it's, you know, the thing is, he was a young guy. I had gone into a barber shop a couple of weeks ago when all this was still quite a bit more fresh, and the barber was a much older guy, and he was watching like propaganda out of Gaza, or watching like not Al Jazeera, but it was like that, you know, very negative against Israel. And he seemed like he was not a happy camper. And I looked at that straight razor sitting on the counter there, and I thought, maybe this is not the time to get a shave and a haircut from a angry Palestinian. But today I felt much better about it. The guy was a younger guy, and he asked me, he said, "What do you think about all this?" And I said, "I think it's a tremendous waste." And he said, "Yeah, I agree with you. It's a tremendous waste." Right now, anybody in the Old City that you meet, which today being Shabbat, all of the people that had their shops open were Muslims. They were Muslim Palestinians mostly. You know, they're all hurting for business. There's no tourists. I saw a few Russians in there today too. Russians are amazing. They don't care about anything. Like, if there's a war on, who cares? We're going on vacation. I mean, they're down on the beach in Crimea watching their own ships get blown up by Ukraine, and they're like, oh, you know, like, they just don't care. I have a grudging respect for Russians in that way. They're just not afraid of anything. They're just like, whatever. But so the shopkeepers in the Old City are really, really hurting. I've talked to many of them. They're just desperate. They try to, like, please buy something from me. And I'm like, dude, I can't buy something from everybody. I'm sorry. But they said, like, I've got hungry kids at home. And it's like, yeah, I get it. And I feel bad for you. I feel bad for your kids. But maybe if you all had stopped trying to kill each other over here, you wouldn't have this problem. You know, most of the people in the West Bank, in Gaza, would really rather that this war not be happening. But it's those extremists, and there's a lot of them. There's hundreds of thousands of them. And there's plenty to go around, and they're not going to allow peace to come anytime soon. So moving over to the West Bank, the Israelis have arrested more than 1,500 people in the West Bank. I got some more rocket alerts here. More than 1,500 people since this war started. They are arresting Hamas operatives. They are busting, going in and kicking in doors and finding Hamas headquarters. They're catching Hamas leaders and arresting them in the West Bank. So this is kind of telling that not all of the commanders of the Hamas units that took part in the October 7th thing were in Gaza. Some of them were in the West Bank. And there are big firefights that are still happening in the West Bank. You know, things are getting really tense. If you look at the propaganda coming from the other side, what they're showing you is that they're claiming that the IDF has been taking, you know, going in there and arresting children. These children happen to be 19, 20 years old, but they call them children, and torturing them. Now, I've seen, when I was driving around the West Bank last week, I've seen some of the people that they arrested. They were not children. They were grown men. They were military-age males. And they were sitting by the side of the road on the ground, handcuffed with their hands behind their backs, up against a wall. Now, I don't know how long they kept them there, but I didn't see any, torture or anything like that. They were certainly rendered safe, but that's because that area that I was in was a very, very dangerous area. The IDF has had to go through some of those towns that are in the B zones that Israelis can enter, and actually close up all of the side streets with mounds of dirt and piles of rubble and things like that, so that a car bomb can't come out and blow up your car while you're trying to drive through there. Thank you, Jesus is coming. I'm sending you. It's from Ken. Okay, great. Thank you. I'm just seeing if there are questions here. I'm wondering if the hostages are all out. Will the war continue? If Hamas were to release all 240 whatever hostages they've got right now, Israel would stop very quickly. They would stop. They would not be done, because they are going to dismantle Hamas and the entire infrastructure of their governance in Gaza. But they would, believe me, there would be a serious reduction in the violence. I promise you. Word came out today that that Hamas offered to release 50 hostages in return for a 5-day ceasefire, a 5-day pause in the fighting. And Israel rejected it. And I would say, just in my opinion, that was the right decision, because any ceasefire right now is only going to prolong the misery for more people. You might get 50 hostages out, but it's going to prolong the war, and it's going to prolong the misery for the other 200 hostages or so that are still there, and for the Palestinian people, and for all of the soldiers who are, called up away from their jobs right now. You understand, there's stuff closed all over Israel right now because they've called up so many people into the military. They're on a total war footing right now. So they have to get this war over with. And if you start negotiating with terrorists, then you are legitimizing those terrorists as if they're a legitimate, adversary, political party. And so you're making them look better in the eyes of the world. But aside from that, you're really not doing a favor for all the people that you're trying to protect and rescue. Hamas has a vested interest in drawing this out as long as they can, because they know that the longer a war goes on, the more popular support for that war starts to wane. And if the support drops among the world body, the world at large, or even among the Israeli people, then it's going to be much, much harder for Israel to achieve its goals, which is to dismantle Hamas and create a safe space for the people of their own country. Right now, believe it or not, in the greater scheme of things, the hostages have to be a secondary objective. Releasing the hostages, rescuing the hostages, has to be secondary to making sure that something like October 7th never happens again. Making sure that, and the only way you can do that is you're not going to reason with Hamas, you're not going to negotiate with Hamas to get them to stop trying to destroy you. You can only ensure that October 7th won't happen again by dismantling Hamas completely, by just wiping them out so that they cannot, whoa, I just heard an explosion. I wonder what that was. There was not a missile warning or anything here, which would make me think, oh, and there's some sirens, would make me think that maybe it was a car bomb or a suicide bomb or something like that. It was very far away, though. I really doubt you could have heard it, but it was from off that direction, which is the kind of Arab quarter over there. It's if I point straight that way, you hit first the old city, and then beyond the old city is the eastern part of Jerusalem, which is the Arab part. And it could have been a grenade or who knows what, some fighting going on. There is stuff that happens from time to time. Fortunately, that does not really extend into Israel. Oh, you did hear it. Steve said he heard it. Well, some people did hear it. Okay. Yeah, that was an explosion of some kind. But again, it was not close. To me, it was miles away at the very least. And so I'm not worried for my safety or anything. So Israel has to dismantle Hamas, and that's got to be their primary goal in this operation. Obviously, they want to get all of the hostages out. They want to rescue them. It's been cool to see how they've been setting up. Thank you, KJ. They've been setting up loudspeakers, and they've been playing the Shem. Somebody explained it to me. It's the prayer that they say in the morning and at night. It's that all Jews say. And so they're blasting this prayer out over the loudspeakers to let any hostages that are within earshot know that they are coming, okay? So it is super important to Israel to get those hostages out, but they cannot do that at the expense of their other objectives, their more important objectives, which is to make sure that this can't happen again. And I hate to say that, but that's just the truth, okay? All right, so let's turn to northern Israel. It's been a busy day up there, and I mean, super busy, getting busier. When I hear about what is happening on the northern border, it makes me feel like I should just go up there and stay up there. Thank you, Holes, Roads, something, I can't quite read that. It makes me feel like I ought to go just to the northern border and just stay up there, because there's a lot of stuff happening up there. There have been artillery attacks, rocket attacks, drone attacks. Today they shot down 3 drones coming out of Lebanon. The IDF responds every time there's violence out of Lebanon. They blow up whatever it was that shot at them. They've taken out dozens and dozens of Hezbollah fighters and Hamas fighters inside Lebanon. Today they struck a target just south of Sidon, which is like 40 miles or 40 kilometers inside Lebanon. That's as deep into Lebanon as they have struck so far. For all intents and purposes, they are at war with Hezbollah already. Now, it's a very kind of limited and halting war, but it's war. And again, I keep saying this, if October 7th had not happened and this was happening on the northern border and they weren't fighting in Gaza, I would probably still be here covering the war in Israel, because it's going big time up there. There's a lot happening. Thank you, Ovi. So there are still more than 60,000 people that have been driven out of their homes in the north and can't go back to work, can't go back home because of the just near constant attacks coming out of Lebanon. Now, Kiryat Shimona got hammered the other day with rockets and mortars and all sorts of stuff. And again, the IDF responds in kind whenever that happens. So there's a lot of fire going back and forth across that border right now. And they determined that the drone that hit or was sent toward Eilat, hit Eilat, came out of Syria. And so the IDF hit targets inside Syria today as well. So, I mean, the IDF is pounding stuff all around, and their Navy is engaged off the coast of Gaza, shooting at targets in Gaza. And at the same time, they are going above and beyond, going further than any military would ever go to help the civilians inside Gaza. These are people who are in harm's way, that are not under arms, who most likely support Hamas, or at least did support Hamas up until 12 seconds ago. But they are unarmed, not resisting, and so Israel is letting them flee. They've set up a couple of humanitarian corridors out of northern Gaza where they can go. Why do you think the rescued hostages haven't spoken yet? It's a real good question. I don't know the answer to that question, and I wouldn't even speculate. There's nothing that says that they have to speak, and I would imagine that they're pretty traumatized. So I guess if I had to guess, I would say it's probably because they just don't want to go on camera right now, and they don't want to jeopardize any of the people who are still being held. It's a good question. So I am catching one or two here, questions here. Please, everyone praying. Okay. So the IDF has set up these two humanitarian corridors coming out of northern Gaza. More than 50,000 people have taken advantage of that. They also said if you can't get to one of those corridors for whatever reason, you can just walk down the beach, and we won't shoot at you if you're just walking down the beach. They have agreed to institute a humanitarian pause in the fighting, which I think is a huge mistake. But Israel is trying very, very hard to make headway where it really counts, like I've always said, on the information battlefront. They have been so far losing on the information battlefront, and that's not because they aren't doing everything they can to fight in the information battle space. It's because most of the media is in the tank for Hamas. If you go and look on the Associated Press website, so the Associated Press is supposed to be kind of the gold standard for, you know, neutral, unbiased journalism. If you want to find out what's happening and you don't want some kind of spin on it, you go to the Associated Press. And I typically get a lot of content off of the Associated Press's websites for the stories that I'm doing. You go look at the Associated Press's website now, and it's all pro-Hamas. It's all pro-Palestinian. It's it's the stories of how much suffering is happening to the poor civilians inside Gaza, and says nothing about the suffering happening in Israel. I can't find an AP video showing the fighting going on from the Israeli point of view on AP. It's all from Hamas's point of view, and very disturbing. Of course, there, have been those stories that came out about the AP and the New York Times and CNN hiring journalists who were actually there on October 7th, who went into Israel with the terrorists to take pictures of them slaughtering Israelis, even armed, some of them. And those agencies have backtracked. Oh, we didn't know they were going in there. We did not have advanced knowledge of what was going to happen. We only started employing these guys after the fact. Yes, but you paid them for the footage they shot on October 7th, which makes you complicit, which means that you encourage more of that. Those guys are, those journalists probably are not long for this world, because they are on the list now of specific targets that the IDF has said we are going to destroy. And they are going to do targeted assassinations on anybody that was there, that was participating in the attack on October 7th. And they have a long history and a long memory of taking out targets anywhere in the world. There's nowhere they can run. If they get found in Paraguay, the IDF will send a Mossad agent down there to assassinate them. This will go on for years. I was at a hotel in Dubai one time when the Mossad assassinated I think it was a PLO operative that was actually staying at my hotel. I didn't know that, but they had a team that there's been a book written about it since then that I went and read, but at the time I didn't know what was happening. All I knew was all of a sudden there was, mass chaos at the hotel, police and first responders and everybody coming and sirens everywhere. And some guy had been shot outside the hotel getting into his car. And it turned out it was the Mossad taking out somebody who had perpetrated a terror attack against the Israeli people. The Israelis have a long memory and they don't forgive. They don't forgive. It might be one of the problems over here is that nobody knows how to forgive. But, and I've talked to Israelis about that and I've said, what will it take for you to forgive the Palestinians and get past this? And they're like, what are you talking about? Like they can't even fathom that. They don't even know what I'm talking about. The concept of forgiveness after what they've done, never, can't happen. And I've even had a chance to tell some of them, if you can't forgive, that hatred will eat you up, will destroy you. You personally have to forgive. I'm not saying that your country must forgive, because the country's job is to, the government's job is to keep its citizens safe. And so they have to kill the people that need to be killed to keep this country safe. But you as an individual, you can't harbor that hate in your heart without it affecting you. You have to learn to let it go. And I tell you what, it doesn't mean you have to forget it. It doesn't mean that it's going to make it easier to get over what happened. But forgiveness is a very, very powerful thing. There are a lot of countries that need to learn to forgive, for sure. It's sad to see so many conflicts in the world that really have been going on for over 1,000 years. And those conflicts go on for over 1,000 years because nobody can forgive. They can never get past it. You killed my father, I killed your father, he kills his father. It just goes on and on and on. Why can't we I gotta compete, as we are only 1/5 of 1% of the world's population. I'm very disturbed at pro-Palestinian marches that are against Israel around the world. I am too, folks. They did a survey and something like about half of young people in America, this is people under the age of 25, are pro-Hamas. They actually support Hamas. They're on Hamas' side of this. This, more than anything I think I've ever seen, shows a tremendous failure in the education system in the United States. To see young people, I watched a young American young man at one of these protests. I watched a video of him climb up a flagpole and tear down all the American flags on the flagpole with a Palestinian keffiyeh around his head. And this guy is ostensibly an American citizen. What's he saying? You want your country to be like Gaza? You want your country to be full of people who would butcher babies, who would behead women, who would rape people after they shot them in the head? What? Are you serious? We got a real problem in America, folks. There's no two ways about it. And it is disgusting, absolutely disgusting, to see how deranged and depraved people can be and how they can attack somebody that they perceive to be Jewish or pro-Israeli, just somebody in Los Angeles, somebody in New York. It has nothing to do with this conflict. But just because they disagree with you politically, you think it's okay to go try to beat them up, maybe even murder them? this is what our country's coming to. Folks, I would suggest highly that you go watch the live broadcast, the podcast I did on my podcast over at the Hot Zone. It's the Hot Zone with Chuck Holton here on YouTube. I did a video today with Tim Miller, who is a security expert, former Secret Service agent, former lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps for like 27 years, and a former police officer. He now has a podcast called the Real Security Podcast, and he just changed the name of it. But if you go search for Real Security Podcast on YouTube, you'll find his podcast. And I highly recommend that you go there and subscribe, because he does real life training about taking a video of a real life encounter, violent encounter, an attack, a robbery, a home invasion, whatever. And he kind of goes through the video frame by frame and sort of explains what's happening and how you can avoid having that happen to you. It's very, very good content, very good training. So I had him on my podcast on the Hot Zone to talk about how to be safe when you travel overseas. When you're traveling, you take a vacation, you go to Europe, you go to Cancun, wherever, how you can be safe in a world that is getting increasingly dangerous all the time. And it was a very, very good discussion, just giving some very concrete ideas about things you can do to make yourself safer when you travel. But one of the things that we kind of touched on was the fact that you're probably in more objective risk being at home than you are when you travel. I can say with absolute confidence that I feel safer here in Jerusalem right now than I would feel in any major city in the United States. Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, Miami, Cleveland, Dallas, Atlanta, Baltimore, Detroit, any place like that. San Francisco, Seattle. I think there's more objective risk of you being involved in a violent encounter in a major American city than there is right here. There's virtually zero crime, property crime, that happens here in Jerusalem, especially now in a time of war. People are, they're focused on other things right now. Of course, we have the ever-present threat of missiles coming in, but with the Iron Dome system, more than 95% of those get shot down. So the likelihood of this apartment getting blown up is very, very minuscule. And the likelihood of me getting hurt just walking around Jerusalem, very small. I would have no problem at all bringing my family over here right now and having them live here with me. But if you want to learn how to be safe when you go to Europe, if you were to go to Paris or Rome, I wouldn't say that about Paris or Rome. There's a lot of risk to American travelers right now around the world. A lot of objective risk from angry people, from criminals, from desperate migrants, you name it. There's a lot of objective risk. And I can tell you that because I've been in many of those cities this year. Traveled all around Europe this year. And I tell you what, it is not the Europe that I remember as a young man enjoying so much. It has gotten very, very dangerous in most big cities across Europe. You go to Latin America, your chances of being robbed are pretty high in most tourist spots, at least, around Latin America right now. There's very few places you can go in the world and go to a big city at least, or go to a big tourist trap area where you're not going to have some objective risk. But there are ways that you can go and enjoy those places just fine. But you have to kind of know what you're doing and be very intentional about your personal safety. And so if you go watch that podcast that we did today over on the Hot Zone with Chuck Holton here on YouTube, you can get some concrete ideas for how to keep yourself safe. And learn, I gave a lot of the secrets that I use when I'm traveling in a war zone that you can apply to your own life every day. when you're traveling or when you're at home. So go check those out. If you want to find the other reporting that I do, you can go to chuckholton.locals.com, chuckholton.locals.com, and you can follow all my books and my movies and the things that I do, the other projects that I have going over there. One of those is our trip to Armenia. If you've been watching, I announced that we were going to Armenia this coming June, and opened it up for anybody that wanted to join me. Well, we actually filled the trip to capacity in less than a week. It is completely full. We've got no more slots. I'm sorry. So what I did was, since the demand is so great, we had probably a half dozen people that wanted to go on the trip in June that we just don't have room for. So I opened up another trip the first, like the 3rd through the 13th of May. We're going to go do the same trip to Armenia, the 3rd through the 13th of May. And so if you want to go with me to Armenia, I highly recommend it. I mean, it's an amazing trip. We've done 7 or 8 of these now, and it's a mind-boggling place to go. It's just incredible. So if you want to go, you can go to the locals page, and there's a link there to it. You can go to my link tree, which I will post in the comments here. It's just, you know how, if you go to Linktree, it's just Linktree/Holton, linktr.ee/Holton. If you want to look there, there's a link to go register for that trip to Armenia. Or you can just contact me at hotzoneholton@gmail.com. You can find me hotzoneholton@gmail.com. That's HOLTON. Send me your comments. I love hearing from you. I've gotten so many great comments and so many great questions, and I love getting to know you people a little bit better. So send me your emails, and I'll try to get to all of them. One of your ancestors came from Armenia? Oh, that's cool. That's great. Okay, I'm going to give you about 60 seconds to post any questions that you have about the current conflict, and I'll answer those questions, and then we'll pray and we'll be done. So I'm gonna just watch here and see. Jen, I'm glad you love the live streams. Thank you very much. Christopher, you must be about 8 years old. That's super cool. Thank you for praying for Israel. God bless you. Have I seen NDTV exclusive about Hamas's operations in 2014? I have not. I'll have to go look that up. If you want, send me a link at my email. Question: what do you think about the burnt car cemetery you saw? Many look like they were struck by a laser. I've never seen a laser that would do that to cars. I have to say, many of those cars were actually run over by tanks that were busy fighting those Hamas terrorists on October 7th. And that's one of the reasons that some of them are so crushed like that. And but the reason that many of them are burned is because Hamas actually intentionally burned those cars, and because they had bodies in them, and they're still identifying bodies out of that parking lot. There, I did see some on a more propaganda website, some claim that Israel had attacked those cars with attack helicopters, thinking that they were terrorists. I have not seen anything to corroborate that claim. I don't think that's true. I have seen cars that were attacked by attack helicopters, and they don't look like that. So those cars were partially they were damaged because in the process of moving them to the cemetery, they weren't super careful about picking them up and everything. They just sort of piled them on trucks and drove them out there. So they did get pretty crumpled up that way. And of course, the metal is weakened tremendously from the fires after they had been burned. But again, some of those were run over by tanks, and some of them were burned specifically by Hamas. In the front of that cemetery where you saw the video that I showed you, I might actually, do I still have the video of that? I don't think I do. No, I don't think I have the video of that. No, I replaced it. So yeah, the burned out cars were kind of in the front of graveyard, but there was a lot of the cars in the back were not burned, and they're just, you know, destroyed, blown up, wrecked, or they don't know whose they are or whatever. Their occupants were killed. And while I was there were people coming and identifying their own scooters and cars and vehicles and stuff, and they had to find the VIN numbers on them and prove that they had the paperwork for them and stuff like that, and claiming some of those. But I don't think there was anything nefarious like a laser at work there. Okay, let's see. Any other questions? Have I been to the BYU Jerusalem Center? I have not. Is it possible for anyone who's not from Israel to join the IDF? No, it's not. Why do you say Kiev? My grandmother was born there. She called it Kiev. Well, they called it Kiev when it was part of the Soviet Union. After they declared independence from the Soviet Union, and you know, during the Soviet Union, it was illegal to speak Ukrainian. They did everything they could during the Soviet Union to wipe out the Ukrainian language, and they forced people to learn Russian and speak Russian. And so after they declared independence, this wave of sort of patriotism and nationalism swept through Ukraine, and they started saying, let's make Ukrainian the national language. And in Ukrainian, the word for the capital city is Kyiv. In Russian, it's Kiev. And so it's taken, you know, 30 years, but slowly but surely, they have replaced the pronunciation Kiev with Kyiv. And that's why. Your grandmother obviously was there during the Soviet Union time, and that's why. Okay, they did that with Lviv. Lviv used to be called Lvov. Kharkiv used to be called Kharkov. Mykolaiv used to be called Mykolov. You know, that they had Russian names, Zaporozhye instead of Zaporizhia, for all the cities in Ukraine. And this is all part of the, you know, the trying to preserve their heritage and their language by calling it by the Ukrainian name. Okay. How are the Jews and Arabs getting along in Old Jerusalem? They're kind of, the Jews and Arabs are kind of ignoring each other, as far as I can tell, in Old Jerusalem. There have been several attacks on Jews in there. I don't know of any attacks where Arabs have been attacked by Jews, but there have been several attacks where Jews have been attacked, and where police or military have been attacked in there by Arabs. So the violence is sort of one-directional, but other than that, like I was down there today at Shabbat, there's tons of Jews going down to the Western Wall to pray, and the shopkeepers don't pay any attention to them. They don't pay any attention to the shopkeepers, and it is what it is, okay? Let's see, am I seeing your chat? Yes, I am, Keith. I'm seeing your chat. Go Israel. Judah and Samaria belong to blah, blah, coming to Ukraine. Still have lots of family. Land has been. Children of Israel, call to mind my favor. Italy. Okay. When are you going to be able to get back to the U.S., Jim? I can't get out of Israel until they reopen the border into Jordan. They don't reopen the border during Shabbat today, so I'm going to have to wait until 8 o'clock in the morning, tomorrow morning, when they open the border crossing in order to cross into Jordan. I'm going to leave here in the morning, and I'm going to go to Amman. I'm going to spend the day in Amman, and I'll do my broadcast from Amman tomorrow. And then at 1 o'clock in the morning or something, my flight leaves to go back to Panama. I'm going to go back to Panama now only for 2 days, which kills me. I was sad that I only had 4 days, and now I only have 2 days at home. And then I'm going to go to Texas for that speech, and then come directly from Texas right back to Ukraine. I mean, where am I? What country is this? Right back to Israel, and be here for another month. Okay. Thank you. Do you have to be vaccinated to fly back? No, I don't have to be vaccinated. I don't know of anywhere left in the world that requires vaccination to travel anymore. That has all gone away. Are the U.S. military troops somehow supporting the IDF? Yes, they are. How many hostages still need to be rescued? About 244. Graciela, the U.S. military is supporting the IDF with signals intelligence, with jamming, that not in a kinetic sense, meaning they're not shooting at anything in Gaza, with the possible exception of some very highly specialized special operations units that are doing missions into Gaza to try to find hostages and rescue them, or something like that. But in the greater scheme of things, no, we are supporting them by giving them weapons, by flying our airplanes around that can pick up signals intelligence and pass intel on to the IDF to help them target. We do have a U.S. military base here in Israel. Most people don't know that. It's down in the south. It's very, very small, right on the Egyptian border, and they call it a air defense radar site. I kind of don't believe that that's all they're doing there, but because why does Israel need the U.S. to run those? They have plenty of their own. But there is one down there. I keep threatening to go down there and try to, get some footage of it, but that might be a good way to get arrested or something. Somebody loves monkeys. You wouldn't love monkeys if you owned them. They're not good pets. They do not know how many hostages are still alive, Cheyenne. They say, Hamas says more than 60 of the hostages have been killed in the airstrikes and stuff, but there's no way to verify that. We don't know. Okay, any other questions? What happens when IDF goes south where the civilians are overcrowded? That is a very good question, Mitchell. I mean, the IDF has not said anything about what their strategy or tactics will be once they have tamed the northern part of Gaza and gotten Hamas out of there. They are going to have to go south because I would say the majority of Hamas's fighters are probably in the south. They are firing rockets from the south. They still have tunnels in the south, and probably all the hostages are in the south if they're even still in Gaza. So they're going to have to do it, but they haven't said anything about it yet. They're just focusing on the north right now. Western Wall live cam at Kotel. Did you see how Gazans tried to flee and Hamas shot at them? Yes, I saw the video of that. Do you know how a rabbi makes coffee? He brews it. Okay, that's a dad joke. I'll have to remember that. I heard that. Thank you for AS. Look, when you guys put a question, if you put in all caps question and then put your question, it makes it a lot easier for me to see, and I'm much more likely to answer it. I've heard that the hostages were transported out of Gaza area and taken to Qatar and other Arab countries. That is the rumor. There has been no confirmation of that. Are things expensive over there? 40-day book? Yes, they are very expensive over here. My supper tonight, which was a piece of fish, an appetizer, and a salad, and a bottle of water, was over $50. So yes, it is expensive here. Okay, there's a question. Does mainstream media have images of Hamas shooting at Gazans? Well, they have access to the same stuff I do, and I've seen video of it. Question, what's your opinion on the hostages being in one place? Absolutely not. There's no way the hostages are all in one place. They would never do that. They've got them all spread out, for sure. Are they catching Hamas terrorists who tried to leave Gaza City during the pauses? No. So many people left. It was like 50,000 people. They weren't checking all the people that were leaving, but without a doubt, there were some terrorists that left. Now, if they saw them leaving with a rocket launcher, I'm sure they would have done something about that. But these guys were leaving and were most likely hiding whatever weapons they had and just got them out. They probably got some of the hostages out that way too. Was the Israeli government arms plan for Gaza once they went? Well, that's, they have not said. I think it's very likely that they are going to make it like the West Bank territories, the B zones, which are secured by the Israelis and administered by the Arabs, or at the very least, maybe even secured and administered by the Israelis, because they're not going to trust the Palestinians anymore. That Halloween, kind of off topic, but I'm agnostic. I stand with Israel. Okay, that wasn't a question though. Let's see here. Question: how do we contact you with any links or information? Email me anything you want to send me to hotzoneholton@gmail.com. Veronica. So, do I need a Ranger buddy? No, I got Ranger buddies. Thank you. Will you be able to cover the rally for Israelis in D.C. on Tuesday? No, I'm sorry, I won't be in D.C. on Tuesday. Can innocent Gazans escape to safety by swimming out into the Mediterranean? No, they would get shot if they tried to swim out into the Mediterranean. The Israelis are offshore, with their navy, and they'll shoot anybody they see swimming. Egypt, who is letting them out, or Israel? No, Israel is letting them out of the northern half of Gaza. So Israel has split Gaza in half, and they control now and have surrounded the northern part of Gaza. The southern part of Gaza, they're leaving alone for now, but they're allowing civilians to go from the north to the south. All the civilians that were unable or unwilling to leave before that want to leave now can leave down those humanitarian corridors. Okay, why are we not talking about the source where all this hate comes from? Islam. Well, go over to my podcast and you'll hear me tell you my opinion about that. Did the priest do the red heifer ceremony anyway? I don't know. Good question. Are daycares, schools, universities open in Israel? No. They've postponed the university opening until December sometime. At the least, some schools are reopening, like in the basements of hotels or in bomb shelters. There was a school, a Muslim school, that was open I was walking down the Via Dolorosa today, and there were some kids in school or someplace in there. So there are a few schools open, but not all. And daycares, I don't know. I haven't seen any daycares open. Do you think IDF gets some intel? There's just not a lot of, do I see more civilians with guns now? Absolutely. There's civilians with guns everywhere now. Although they're not really civilians, because everybody serves in the military here. And you have to be in the military, at least on reserve status, to have a firearm. And so they're walking around with their rifles, but they're in civilian clothes. Why so many men in Gaza? I'm not sure what you mean by that, Jacqueline. Can I ask Netanyahu to stop killing genocide Palestinian children? Well, I would, but he's not. He's not killing Palestinian children, so there's no sense asking him. What about Balfour Declaration ending on 10/31? What do you think? I'd have to read up on that. Thank you, Liao Zhao. Thank you for the... Have I seen people taking down hostage posters? Here in Israel? No, you're not going to see people taking down hostage posters here in Israel. There's lots of hostage posters up around Israel. You're not going to see anybody taking them down, because they'd probably get shot or arrested at the very least. When people out of North Gaza will pauses stop? I don't know. I think it's a mistake, personally, in my own opinion, to have a pause. But these pauses are not like the IDF stopping everything they're doing. They're not pausing everything. They're saying, in this neighborhood, we're going to pause for a certain amount of time. Like in this, they call it a camp. I want to explain something very quickly. The refugee camps that you hear about in Gaza and in the West Bank are not camps in any way that we would understand them. When you and I think of a refugee camp, we think of a bunch of makeshift shelters or tents that are sort of, they're temporary dwellings, people sleeping on the ground, aid agencies in there helping them out. That is not what, when they say refugee camps in Gaza, what they mean is like a slum. It's a neighborhood with permanent buildings, multi-story, 4 or 5 story buildings made out of concrete. It's not a camp like you think. And so to say they bombed a refugee camp, they bombed a house in a neighborhood is what the truth is about that. Okay, so let's see what else we got here. How can your viewers help you financially while you're on duty reporting in those crazy dangerous zones? Thank you for asking that question. You can give right here, or you can give to cbn.com. I highly recommend you do that. Or you can go support me personally at chuckholton.locals.com and support my reporting over there. Question, are you leaving the North, are those leaving the North being vetted in any way? It's not possible, it's not possible. There's tens of thousands of them leaving. It'd be like trying to vet everybody leaving a football stadium after a football game. You're not going to do that. It's just not possible. Is Hamas leader Hassan Youssef alive? I believe he is alive. Is the son of Hamas' father alive? I have not heard. I don't know that for sure. Let's see. Whoop. Question. Any word about increasing civilian possessing more than 100 rounds? That's not enough for protection. I have not heard anything about the round count changing, but again, we're under sort of martial law here, and so the people that are carrying weapons are probably able to have more ammo than that. I'll have to ask. That's a really good question. I'm going to stop some guys on the street and ask them about that, because that's very interesting. I wasn't even aware of that. Only if you know the answer. I can't remember how those documents are called. Destroying Europe, where Destroying Europe promised to take in all Muslims while getting an oil promise. I don't understand your question, Renee. I'm sorry. Israel created. Question, have you seen the IDF use sponge bombs? Well, no, I wouldn't see that because they'd be using them underground. Sponge bombs are like a bomb that's great stuff, like you get at the hardware store, like that sealant, that foam sealant. It's a giant one. They throw it in a tunnel and it goes off and it seals the tunnel up. So you wouldn't see those being used. And again, they won't allow me to go into Gaza. I would love to go. I'm trying to get them to let me go, but so far I have not been successful in that. How are my sons doing with all this stuff? My sons are doing great. Do I pay my own airfare? No, I do not. CBN pays my airfare. Okay, please, I want to know if IDF will agree on a ceasefire without all the kidnapping being freed. Well, not a ceasefire, they will not. They have said over and over again they will not agree to a ceasefire. They won't even talk about it until all of those hostages have been freed. So, okay. Base POV, if you think Israel created Hamas, you are depraved, sir. I'm saying there's no crime in Israel. I'm saying the crime here is much less than it is in any American city at the moment. I'm not saying it's always that way. I'm saying at the moment it is less because everybody's busy with other things. Okay. Well, I think, will IDF flood the tunnels with seawater? I don't know. I kind of doubt it because they don't want to take the chance of drowning hostages that could be down there. I don't think, unless they knew there were no hostages down there, I don't think they would do that. Besides, there probably are systems to keep them from filling with seawater, since many of those tunnels are below sea level anyway. Okay? All right, let's pray and get out of here. I've got to run. I've got more work to do today. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you're enjoying your Saturday. God bless you. And let's pray. Lord Jesus, I just want to come to you and ask for rest on this Shabbat. I want to ask for rest for the Israeli people, for people around the world. for all of us to be able to just take a moment and breathe and just kind of off gas a little bit. Lead us to the truth, Lord, in everything that we do. That's the whole purpose of what I'm doing here, Lord, is to try to uncover and bring the truth to people. I pray that you'd help me with that. You'd help me to expose my own biases, my own prejudices, and to be able to deliver a quality product and glorify you in what I'm doing here. I pray that the IDF would be protected as they go into Gaza, that you'd give them special wisdom as to where to go, whether to turn to the left or to the right. And I just pray that they would root out every evil man that's in Gaza, that they would be able to completely dismantle the terrorist organization, to find and prosecute all the people who were involved in the October 7th attacks. I pray peace for the families of the victims. I pray that you would return the hostages, but that you would do it in a miraculous way, Lord, so that nobody can take credit but you for them coming home. I pray that you would guard the minds of those poor little... I pray that you would guard the minds of those poor little children who are right now in the dark, afraid, being held captive, and that you would bring them home, that you would send your mighty angels to free those children, Lord, and to get them out of there. I pray that you would send your Holy Spirit to ignite the conscience of the people who are holding them and to call them, to let them free, Father. And I pray all these things in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen. All right, folks, never fails. This same van comes here every night, about 3 times a night, and spends 10 minutes backing into a parking space in this parking lot down below me. And I want to throw a rock at him, so help me, but I'm not gonna. So pray for me too. God bless you, and thank you all. Take care.